Hi, welcome. Welcome to another leadership conversation that takes place every Saturday. I'm happy to have you here. And you can also catch these conversations that happen between Lorlett and myself and with special guests from time to time when we're fortunate and these wonderful leaders in their own areas of work are able to make time to be with us on Saturday. So, first of all, I want to start off acknowledging you to say thank you for being here. My name is Munwara Ali. I'm a leadership coach, consultant, and mentor. I'm also a CEO of a charity in East London called Wolf and Forest Community Hub, a fantastic charity with a wonderful team that I'm very proud of. And I love these conversations on Saturday where we talk about trailblazing, we talk about some very uncomfortable things. And we're very fortunate today to have Kate with us. Kate will enlighten us with some hugely important tips and insight into neurodivergence and how important that is to building inclusivity within your organizations, within your teams. So Lola is usually here with me on Saturdays, but for some reason she's being delayed. So she will no doubt join us soon. In the meantime, I'm going to invite our wonderful guest, Kate, who's waiting to come in.
Waiting in the wings.
Yay! Hi, Kate.
Hi, Monwara. How you doing? Good morning,
Uh,
good afternoon,
Evening.
evening.
Yes. So yeah, Kate, it's wonderful to have you here, and I
Thank
want to
you.
say thank you very much. And I want to say this so that other people can also hear. Um, you have a very busy, hectic professional life as well as home life. You have two children that you are also like, especially mine are a lot older, but you have a younger one, and you're usually like quite occupied. So I really appreciate you making the time. Thank you. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Monwara. My name's Kate Isichei. I'm really pleased to be here. Monwara and I have been following each other on LinkedIn for a few years now, and she's a great source of inspiration to me. So I'm a neurodivergence consultant, particularly in regard to autism and ADHD. I help organizations and people managers specifically to harness the skills of neurodivergent employees. So that's me.
Thank you. And I've noticed as well, Kate, probably one of the things when I started connecting with you on LinkedIn, why I felt like your expertise in the area of communication was a little bit different than everybody else, because I found that you seem to, even through your post and your interaction with our connections, our community on LinkedIn, I found that you were very considerate, and I find that, like the way you communicate, you think of so many different angles, and I think maybe for that reason I found you like an interesting person to connect with. And we've been on some journeys recently, so I'm going to first of all ask you to tell me a little bit about, what was the mountain climb like for you, and the second part of that question would be, what did you learn about others on the journey?
Yeah, I mean, we just had an amazing journey. As Monwara said, we went up a mountain in Austria just a few weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. I can't really explain in words. I feel a bit sort of tearful when I think about it because it was such a mountain, a physical mountain, but also a psychological mountain to climb. And it was life affirming too. So I absolutely found it an amazing experience. I would love to do it again at some point. Monwara was there cheering us all on. She's a dark horse, Monwara, just in case you guys don't know. She's a very dark horse, very dark horse. A woman of many hidden talents, many visible talents, but also many hidden ones. So the biggest thing I learned from the climb about others is the ability to be able to morph into different characters depending on the situation and what it demands.
No, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know who's listening, but that's a hot tip for leadership, if any. The ability to morph into different in different situations. Some people may call it situational leadership, but I think there's more of an inclusion in there than anything else. But yeah, and what about other people? Let's look. The mountain climb in Austria, for listeners, was an opportunity to raise funds, but it was also a personal development program. Because figuratively speaking, we all climb mountains. In everyday life, if you ever meet a 40-year-old or 40 something year old like us, you will have to inevitably like just come to the conclusion that we will have fought so many mountains in our life to get to where we are, and then like the real mountain. And I think it was hard, but like we raised just under £2,000 through that mountain climb, and we are going to raise much more. And we've had some wonderful connections on LinkedIn and away from LinkedIn, each of our networks, who have supported us by cheering us on, donating, and I know there'll be more coming forward. But the reality is, when you take on something like that, Kate, you are very much similar to me. We do it because we feel motivated. We want to make a difference in the world. And when we do something that is actually for others, that may be our motivation in terms of, in some ways, I don't even think it's extroversy. I think it's more about wanting to make a difference in the world. And when you jump on that bandwagon, what you actually do, it changes your life, because you end up growing as a result of that challenge, as an individual. That's why when you said life affirming, I was like, okay, what is it about other people that you learn? You can name people if you want to please use this platform to acknowledge some of our team members that were on the journey, because I'm sure when they hear this, they will feel really good about themselves.
Yeah, I want to say good morning to the participants. I can see Atik. Good morning. And Gula, the wonderful, lovely Gula's here. Good morning, Gula. Good afternoon, Gula. Love to see you. Yeah, so with you, I think I'll start with you. So with you, I learned that you are very adaptable. As I said, you can morph quite easily and seamlessly, in fact, depending on what the situation requires. So you are a true leader, I believe, in that you're able to corral the troops regardless of the personalities at play. So when we went to Austria, there are so many different people with so many different personalities, all different drivers and motivations and abilities and challenges, but you were able to adapt to talk to each one. You made time for everyone. So that's what I learned about you, your ability to be able to morph is the best way I can describe. One minute you were a tiger, next minute you were a lion, then you were a horse, then you were sorry to use the animal analogy, but
I love it. I love it.
you were different things for different circumstances, and more importantly for different people. And then we had Tuli. I know we and Arifa, who was a wonderful inspiration, young woman, who was so competent and able, and a kind of a leader in the making. And through her, actually, I learned that I probably worry too much about others. I am compassionate, as you said, and I find it really hard to let go of that compassion. So, there were a couple of times where one particular time where she went off for a walk and I got really panicky and worried. And I think you all saw me have a bit of a meltdown because I just assumed that something had happened to her. So I learned something about myself there, but also learned to trust, to trust others and to know that they are capable, more than capable, in fact. Yeah, and just that people are vulnerable. You see people who look strong on the outside, who may present themselves as very confident and outgoing and strong, but in the inside they are extremely sensitive and vulnerable. And yeah, that was probably my biggest learning about the few people in the group.
Yeah, no, it's. I do. One thing I find really valuable about you, Kate, is like, your practice. You do make an effort to reflect. And I think this is where, like, being open like this on this platform, sharing our experiences and our learning about other people does make a difference, because that's part of our growing too. Like the moment we can say out loud the things that make us uncomfortable, it,
Mm.
it it then makes us feel like we can accept that. So yeah, and sorry, Gula and Atik, I do, when I'm in full focus, I'm just like in full focus. I completely missed you. I wasn't looking at the chat. But yeah, thank you very much for being here. It's great to have you, and empowering for us as well, right?
Exactly.
um, what did you learn about Veronica? And I mean, the thing is, many of us didn't really know each other that well, did we?
No, not deeply, not deeply. I probably knew a couple of people more than others. So Catherine, yourself, and Stella, I knew relatively well, quite well, I would say. Veronica less so, and Rifa no. And I've forgotten the other ladies.
Shahina.
Shahina, that's it, the lovely Shahina. I didn't know her at all. She was a complete stranger to me, as was Rifa. So yeah. Um, it was just interesting in understanding how we all are on a human level, because we living together for those couple of days, and we were eating together, and we were having breakfast in the morning. We're always around each other. There was no room for pretense, I suppose.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, there was no way you could hide. There was no way you could pretend to be something that you're not. So on social media, we know that people put on a mask and act put on an act, but in that kind of situation, there's so much vulnerability, because you're scared, you're a bit trepidatious, you don't know what's going to happen on the mountain, you don't know if you're capable. I think we all had doubts,
mm,
regardless of the fact that I've run half marathons. You know me, I'm a very fit person. I was scared. I was thinking, oh my God, this is a high mountain. This is a really high mountain. And how impatient I was to get to the top. So yeah, I know I was annoying people. I know that. And I know I didn't necessarily stick to the group mantra, which was, no one goes ahead and we all stay together. But I literally couldn't help myself, and I was on a mission internally
mm. I
to
mean,
reach the top. Yeah,
the reality is, I mean, you could think, or you might assume that there was a group or team mantra, but to be honest, I've done lots of challenges, and one of the things I said to a couple of the others is what will happen. And it is about, when you're coordinating a challenge like that, part of my risk assessment, if I'm in charge, and I know Rifa was in charge in that situation in some ways, but we were kind of coordinating, because it was the first time for her and she needed
yeah,
that support. And I think we talked about how I said to her, what will happen in reality? Because I remember the first time I did a challenge, I read books, I had a checklist, just like your way of operating, like
yeah,
want to be very organized, do things really well. And I learned things on those challenges. And so I pre warned and I said, what will happen is, because we're all very different, similar abilities, there will be smaller groups. So a big group then breaks into smaller groups.
yeah. That's what
People,
happened, isn't it?
yeah, and people tend to travel with people that are physically of their ability,
Yeah,
and sometimes the mindset has to be similar, right?
yes,
And I think where in our case, probably what was hard for Veronica was she'd probably want to be up ahead with you, because
yeah,
physically she could do that. But
yes,
I, in some ways, held her back, because one, I felt like I needed that support. And I said to her from the very beginning, I said, you're the only one who could get me to the top, because in some ways, our personalities are very different, and I have learned the hard way. Sometimes difference is the best thing you can do, is have and work with someone who is completely the opposite to you, because that person can drive you. She's very much in nature, in love, and in the moment, whereas I am very future focused.
yeah,
And so it was like, people may have said, oh, why is Kate going ahead? But my thing was, so long as Kate has somebody with her, we're fine.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and it's not outside the team, because I know when you got to the top, you were waiting for us, right?
I was waiting, yeah, desperately waiting for you. Yeah, I was so, I can't explain, Monwara, how life affirming it was. When I got to the top, I was elated, and the last bit was hard, as it was literally vertical, and I kept slipping backwards because it was so steep. There was another lady, German lady, and she was about in her 60s, but so so damn fit. We were sort of climbing at the same pace, and she was egging me on and I was egging her on. And when I finally got to the top, yeah, it was astonishing. And I learned, as you said, difference drives innovation and drives progress. And I've learned so much through you, actually, and the escapades you've taken me on. My adventures all stem from you, actually,
Oh,
latterly. Um,
really?
yeah, a lot of. I mean, I know I missed out on the 2022 climb to Ben Nevis, but I was there with you spiritually. So I do feel like I climbed it in my head, and that's why another reason why it was so important. But through those interactions with you and with the other people on the expeditions, I learned a lot about my neurodivergence and my children's, and how it helps and hinders
Hmm.
my abilities. So yes, I was very regimented, in the days running up to the climb. I was so worried and panicked. It didn't help that we had some challenges with the flight being cancelled, and then we had to rebook, and I kept asking you and Reefa questions, and I was at work literally sending you messages on WhatsApp about travel insurance and all sorts. But that's the way my
Hmm.
brain can function. So I'll tell you a story. A lot of ADHD
Hmm.
people, ADHDers, couldn't get medication over the last 3 months, and many of them lost their jobs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
No
because
idea.
they needed that medication in order to maintain their organization.
Oh, wow.
Without that, I mean, I don't take medication. I've not been formally diagnosed, but so as a result of that, I've constructed my life in such a way that I know everything that's happening, because otherwise things just disappear from your brain, and there's no way that's why I said, can you send me an email? Because then I can see it on my phone, I can see it on my laptop, I get a reminder. That's the way we work. If we don't have that, then it's really difficult to function well.
I mean, this is a classic, what you've just said, and I know I'm going to re listen to myself speaking and you and learn even more. But what you've just said is a classic reason why it's really hard to build inclusion, because if somebody has ADHD,
Yeah,
what's going to stand out like a sore thumb is their inability to trust very quickly, and a lot of people expect that. And what I have learned in my journey, and this is with no understanding about neurodiversity prior to maybe a couple of years ago, what I have learned is that trust always takes a long time to build, yet we expect people to give us trust from day one. So remember that when we were online and I got a little bit emotional that
yes,
time, it
yeah,
was because the reason being is because I had just one trust and it happened so quickly.
yeah.
Because when I met you, I thought, with this one, it's going to take time.
She's a bit suspicious.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, we have to ask the right questions, because our past experiences where we have been let down and trust has been broken has been because we haven't been as careful, right?
Yeah, true, true. And I'd forgotten that I'd approached it in that way. It was only when you reminded me in Austria, I thought, oh, was that the way I was? I probably didn't even notice, Monwara. You
No, we
would.
don't. We
No.
don't. I don't notice when I'm taking too much space. It's only afterwards when I listen and I'm like, oh, I said too much. I shouldn't have. Because we naturally, people talk about authenticity and self awareness. You can read books, you can attempt to be self aware, but there will come a point where you default back to your type. and you don't even realize it. But when you work with a team of individuals, people that you've been on a journey together, who know you better, in some ways, you act like each other's support mechanism. So I always say to my team, I say to them, you know what I'm like. Please tell me if I'm going too fast.
Yeah,
Tell me if I'm too slow. Tell me to be quiet. Tell me to butt out. And they do. And I don't get offended,
that's good.
you know.
That's
But
really good.
yeah, I mean, I really loved. So moving on to the next part, I really loved how you wrote your post and you structured around forward movement and inclusion. So I want you to maybe tell us a bit about those points that you made today
Yeah.
in
Well,
your
lead,
post
well,
yesterday.
exactly. I mean, you lead teams, and what I've just alluded to just now is the way that my mind works. So when people think about neurodivergence, particularly conditions like autism and ADHD, they get scared. Maybe not you, because you're an open-minded leader who is naturally inclusive, but many leaders don't understand, anything about neurodivergence, and as a result of that, don't know that or don't realize that it's basic human interaction that are the solutions to those challenges that are faced. So with, as I said just now, ADHD, part of the issue is organization, managing time, being able to follow through on tasks, and manage your schedule. It's really, I can't emphasize how difficult that is for someone with ADHD. People just think, oh yeah, you've got a busy mind, you can't stop, you can't sit still. Yeah, there's that. But as an adult, particularly, you learn to sit still as an adult because you have to. As you're growing up, you realize that you can't be moving around everywhere. I get around it by running and going to the gym, and I'm always exercising and trying to organize something like climbing a mountain, and that satisfies that, inability to sit still, hyperactivity. But
Mhm.
it's more to do with inattentiveness. So with inattentiveness, your brain finds it really hard to settle on one thing. So I put a post out a few months ago. I don't know if you recall, you may not have seen it, but I talked about how my brain works in the house. So I could be going upstairs to get my phone on the
I've
way up
seen.
the stairs. Yeah, I see the floor is dirty. I go back downstairs to get the vacuum cleaner. I'm always stopping myself. I'm always trying to multitask. There's no such thing as multitasking. You're just doing one series of things, one after the other. So when a leader is faced with that, they may not even understand that. They don't know where to begin. So their automatic assumption is this is too hard. I can't cope. It's difficult enough having various personalities, various cultures, various genders, various ages to manage. I can't deal with another layer of difference, be it autism or ADHD. It's too challenging.
Mm.
But there are some very small things that you can do in order to make ADHDers or autistic employees feel more at home. And it's to do with the ability of the leader to have a conversation with their team members, and deep, meaningful conversations at that, which you're obviously very good at. It's that sitting down. One of the things I noticed about you in Austria was your ability to just sit down and make that time. And it was like, there was nobody else around when you were sitting next to that person, because your attention was 100% on them. And you need to have that skill to be able to understand what challenges their condition poses for them, how they themselves mitigate those challenges, and how you can adapt your leadership style to create a more inclusive environment for them. I'm not saying it's easy, but there are some
Mm.
very quick and simple wins that you can start off with. And where that begins is in the conversation,
Mm.
where you sit down and you go very close to them and you start talking. So I remember when we were on the plane on the way home back to London, I can't remember who it was. Reefa was sitting next to me, and then Reefa, you swapped seats with Reefa and came and sat next to me.
Mm.
And my automatic thought was, oh God, Mawara's coming to sit. She's going to try and get something out of me.
What do you
she's gonna start asking me difficult questions. How
Oh
can I get
my
out of
God.
this? Reefa, come back.
Fight or flight
It made you
mentality.
feel very uncomfortable.
Did I?
Yeah, a bit.
And what happened afterwards?
Well, then
After
you
the.
started talking, and then you sucked me in, and then
Okay.
got me to say stuff.
How did I force you?
You didn't force me. You just lured me in with your niceness.
You're just like making me laugh so much. You.
Uh, and then, but before I know it, I thought, what are you saying? Keep it shut. She'll go soon. Don't spill your guts. But yeah, you're very good at that. You're very good at making people reveal what's inside. Yeah, yeah,
Well, the thing is, I don't know if I'm. All I did was I just remembered we didn't really get any time, quality time. And all I wanted to do was have a conversation because I felt like, in some ways, that hadn't happened.
yeah. And that was
And
deliberate, I think, because you put on a bit of a happy mask, and you want to maintain that, don't you? Facade.
yeah, and I think also because we're all in a journey. We have our relationships are also different. I'm very much aware when people come on a journey and they're coming because they, one way or another, connect with me.
Yeah,
Because if they didn't connect with me, they wouldn't be on such a big challenge, right? Because it is a big challenge. It might be big for different reasons,
yep,
but I am aware that I am probably the catalyst.
yep,
So those individuals have made that huge commitment, and in some ways, maybe I encourage people to um, almost embrace the fire,
yeah,
because I do it.
exactly.
Be- because I do it, I lead in that way where, okay, I don't know the answers. I'm really feeling uncomfortable, but I really feel like when I've reflected back, a lot of introspection, I've realized that my greatest growth has come from those times.
Yeah,
So it's like I felt like it was important for me to make time for everybody, because once you're gone, you're back to your busy everyday life, and
exactly.
then that opportunity, that moment is lost.
Yeah, that, and you did it very well. You did it with aplomb. I think that you sat down with each and every one of us and had, a deep conversation. And I try my best to avoid that at the best of times, because it's just my nature.
Hmm.
I'm a very private person.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
I ran up that mountain more or less.
You ran away from me. I knew that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't running away from you. I was running away from myself, I think.
Yeah,
And
when we're running away from some, or if people say somebody else, it's usually us.
yeah, it was me. It was definitely me I was running away from. And there were moments going up the mountain where I was actually quite scared. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you, or a couple of other people, that I was quite scared at certain points because I couldn't see anyone.
Yeah.
There were points where I couldn't see anyone. And I thought that's what I wanted. But when I got to the point where there was no one around, like nowhere around me, I was actually quite scared
Why were you scared?
because I was in a vulnerable position on my own in the middle of Austria on a mountain. I mean, what if something happened to me? What if I fell? Who would have seen me? Yeah,
Yeah, and that's like when you're leading a group of people, that's at the forefront of the person who is the organizer. Because, and I have tried to improve over the years where I have been told by others, you don't have to be responsible, but you are going to be responsible. When you know deep down inside, like people are connecting with you because of you, you are going to feel a sense of responsibility when you know, like, you just started this thing. If anything goes pear-shaped, oh my gosh. And it's not even, and I'm going to go, a little bit deeper, it's not even about what the world says, it's about the judgment in our head, in
Yeah,
our mind. And because we are a little bit different in that respect, Kate, I recognize that straight away. And it's very hard because the greatest battle is the battle we have to fight with our thoughts,
exactly.
and our thoughts are going to keep on changing, and they change according to the situation. One minute you were up there and my thought was, okay, Stella's with her, she'll be fine, right? And then next minute, can't see you.
Yeah,
And then I'm thinking, but Stella's there. So like those thoughts you can't. And then when I heard Catherine saying, I noticed you take the long route, and I said, that's just been the story of my life. I never take the quick route because the long route looked safer, it was more
yeah,
flatter, and every time I was close to the edge I felt dizzy.
yeah,
So I put dizziness down to, okay, altitude or whatever. And then Catherine made me realize it's because I'm not breathing slow enough. I'm going too fast. So I slowed down and I started focusing on every single step I was taking.
yeah,
And then the mind became more silent. I
yeah.
was no longer focused at everybody else. That's how I got to the top.
Well, this is the thing, and you were able to manage. And I take my hat off to you. I really do, because you're not. I don't think you'd mind me in saying you're not as fit as perhaps myself
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Veronica, but you did it just the same. You did it just the same. You reached the top like everyone. We're all of varying abilities, physical abilities, and fitness levels. But even as fit as I am, I was scared. I was really nervous about getting to the top, and I wanted to prove to myself that I was able to do it. And that's part of that judgment that I have, with that busyness in my mind, with the ADHD. But your ability to manage that self doubt, the physical manifestations around altitude, challenges with altitude, and still spend time with each person and corral them and encourage them is what a leader needs, not what, all a leader needs in order to be able to have an inclusive culture. You don't have all the answers as a leader. You don't know what to do every single time. But what you do is you give people enough space to be themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what sometimes worries me, because what some of the things that we now learning more about, we didn't know enough about 5 years ago.
Mm.
And some organizations and companies are still stagnant and operating in exactly the same way.
It's a real shame because all it takes is that ability to be vulnerable, and I think you don't mind being vulnerable, and you often, I have a suspicion at the back of my mind. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I think sometimes you do play up to it a bit, because there are a couple of moments where I thought, you're moving quite quickly there, Monwara. I can see some pace in your feet. So I don't know, maybe I'm doing you a disservice in saying that, but I think that sometimes you position yourself as being a bit more vulnerable than you actually are, uh,
Um,
physically as well.
yeah, maybe. I mean, once upon a time when I was lighter, I used to play kabaddi, which is
I know Kabaddi, yeah.
yeah, kabaddi, and I used to be one of those, like, the champion in the group.
Yeah.
And I always played to win. And I think probably my mind is still at that level,
Mm,
but I have come to terms with when I had to, like, I fell over once, and I got scared, because I don't want I sometimes we can be at risk of mentally going at one pace, and then age is catching up, and
that's true.
you've got to slow down physically. And
Mm,
so I think that's, and maybe it's because I'm a Libra, I'm trying to always balance. So it's never about, like, I do listen, like what you've said or somebody else has said, but in that moment I might not hear what you're saying as much. But afterwards, when I reflect, it makes me realize things. And even with on the mountain, I thought, I have Catherine, and I asked Catherine to join us. When I asked Catherine, I didn't even know she was going to say yes. I
Mm.
kept it a secret because I thought, yes, I have the best of my team,
Yeah.
right? And when Catherine said yes, it gave me comfort because I know my personality is very much okay. Is everyone else going to be all right? And that often means like I'll be on the deathbed because I've given everyone else the gas mask. I haven't got one myself.
Yeah.
And so that also means I will encourage everyone else to get to the top of the mountain and I might be at the bottom.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you did. That came to pass.
Yeah. So having Catherine with me, I knew physically I didn't have the fitness levels to get to the top of the mountain. But having Catherine with me, I knew that she would help me with because she does mountain climbing every weekend. She
Yeah.
knows, and the thing with Catherine is she's a people's expert. If I
Mm.
could give her a title, I would say she's an expert in people. And so she was watching my every move. She was following my thinking. And everything she said was in alignment with that. So
Yeah.
and because she's such a fantastic communicator, she understands, she's been around the world with so many different diverse cultures. I trusted her more than I trusted myself,
Yeah.
and that you will find quite funny, but like I sometimes find it easier to trust others than I trust myself.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
lean on others very well, and that's a great skill to have as a leader. You know,
Mm,
that ability, that like I said, it's that vulnerability, isn't it? It's that
yeah.
willingness to hand over your power to others, because it could easily go wrong, couldn't it? If you depend on
Yeah.
someone. Can you imagine if Catherine let you down on the mountain?
No, I knew she wouldn't let me down for
No,
something.
I
That's
know
what I'm
she wouldn't,
saying.
but can
Yeah.
you imagine if she did? If she was that kind
Yeah.
of person? I know she wouldn't, because she's too lovely to do that. But
Yeah. No. The thing is, okay, I don't usually say this in public a lot, but like I'm a spiritual being. So as a spiritual person, I think religion has something to do with it, or faith. When I am trusting somebody, I know I have no choice. There is no choice. You have to leave your trust in faith. As
yeah,
in, like if someone lets me down, I want to trust them by deep down inside believing that I'm leaving my trust in God.
yeah,
And if that individual, in some ways, I know I don't want to make it sound wrong because I'm not saying that individual is personifying God, but what I'm saying is
yeah, I
it's
know.
like having the trust because you know what it is? What choice do you have? Do you have
Well,
any other choice?
you walk by faith, don't you?
Yeah, it's like when our children are young, right? We tend to be very productive, protective because of our own lived experience, right?
Mm,
As someone who's come from a background where I've overcome lots of problems, and I know, like, as someone who as a child could have been taken into care and I wasn't,
mm,
the system overlooked or didn't realize because I was very good at keeping a mask.
mm.
I then what as a parent, I am that kind of parent who would be overprotective over my children, right? And then you get to a point where you realize when they're 16, 17, like, yes, you are being protective because you want to protect them and safeguard them. But if you don't teach them to be independent and give
Mm.
them a bit of freedom, then the reality is they're not going to know how to cope and then they're going to blame you. And also, once they're adults, you
Yeah,
know,
how are they going to be able to look after them? And I'm going through the same thing, with my eldest. She's 17 now. She just turned 17, and it's a real, struggle, because I'm so used to wrapping her in cotton wool. I'm
it's,
I'm going to have to let her make mistakes, which I don't want to do. But that's how I
mm,
learned when I was her age. I learned the hard way. So, I mean, I'll give a very basic example. We went out this morning to take my son to his lesson, and it was pouring with rain. It's absolutely bucketing down in my area, in North London. And we got to our destination, which is a library. That's where he does his lesson. And I turned around to look at because I was so busy getting my son ready, because he needs a lot of support and scaffolding, to manage his day. I turned around and I saw her, and she was wearing this flimsy, I don't know how you could describe it, like a typical summer cardigan, like lightweight army jacket, no hood, no warmth, no protection. And I had my regatta mountain coat on, the same one that I used to climb up Schefberg in Austria, because it's that kind of weather here, it's really bad. And I couldn't believe it. I said to her, what on earth? And I had a bit of a rant, and she was, oh, calm down, it's just a jacket. And I was like, well, what if you catch a cold? And then in the end, I realized, well, I can't do that forever.
Yeah.
If she gets wet and she gets cold, then she gets wet and she gets cold.
And she'll learn from it.
Yeah, next time she doesn't want to be wet and cold. Yeah. So she'll, I mean, yeah, the best parents know when to let go.
Yeah.
And the same with the leadership. That's part of the skill set, isn't it? That ability to know when to let go, because you don't want a team member to fall flat on their face, but you also have to give them this, the room to make mistakes too.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that, like, it takes time because we've been conditioned in some ways, maybe history is just repeating ourselves, how I became, or my leadership style about, my idea of, oh, I'm protecting, safeguarding everyone. But then we don't know for the recipient is control. She's a controlling manager, or she's a micromanager, or she's a
Yeah.
controlling parent. I think years ago, I remember, I don't know who said it, but somebody said youth workers make the worst parents.
Yeah.
And I always fancied myself a good youth worker. So I
Yeah.
thought, and I'm very good with everyone else's child and giving parents advice. But when it came to listening to my own, it was a different story. But I think that's why I always say my children have been my greatest teachers. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that reflective practice. And I have to say, and I've said this before, for me, it's like posting on LinkedIn every day. It forces me to reflect. Not every day, but at least like 5 times a week, because it forces me to reflect. I think the night before, I'm writing things down, and that reflective piece, I come out of a situation, I think back, because we're human. It's not a question of, oh, you are a lot more hot on self awareness and you're now suddenly a more self aware leader. It's not, it's a constant, it's an ongoing battle. Some
Yeah.
days you won't be as self aware, and some days you will be, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. It's an ongoing challenge, isn't it? Something we have to keep practicing. It's like a muscle. It
Mm,
needs to be strengthened, every day regularly in order to work well. But yeah, like you said, it was interesting. I was smiling to myself when you just said your children have taught you so much. It's the same with mine too, but particularly in regard to neurodivergence, because they're both neurodivergent, and the way they behave and the way that they interact with other people teaches me so much about how my limitations and also my strengths, and things that I used to see as weaknesses are actually strengths, and vice versa. So yeah, they really hold up a mirror to me, and it's very common, Monwara.
mm,
I don't know if you're aware that lots of children who are diagnosed with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, etc., often their parents then, as a result, get a diagnosis because their
mm,
children have been diagnosed. Yeah, they were missed as they were
mm,
growing up. And when I was little, there was no such thing as understanding around autism or ADHD. I'd never heard that mentioned once when I was young. It's only in the last, 10 years, 15 years, you've started to hear those conditions being spoken about. So, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get a diagnosis, because the waiting list is about 4 years for adults. I haven't got, the
mm,
inclination or the motivation to do that. I might do it privately, but I already know, without being told. Um,
mm.
And so, yeah, they really hold up a mirror to me, because things that annoy me about their behavior is often things that I do. So very interesting.
Is so true, that whole mirror thing, because it's like, I'm into all of that, like in terms of understanding people, and I find that often what we hate or don't like in other people is a mirror of our own, behavior in some ways.
Exactly.
It's interesting what you said. Like, I find that as a youth worker, I was faced with a lot of, like, autism and in young people. But when I've been working in teams, the kind of patterns I've seen, and this is nothing to do with diagnosis, the kind of patterns I've seen is, you know, people that go extremely fast and
Mm.
people that are very, very structural, and then you see people that are very slow, and both extremes in
Mm.
some ways are the type of people that are not valued in those spaces, because most people can't cope with that difference. And
Yeah.
I don't think it makes any difference whether those individuals are, like, from ethnic background, or whether they are a particular faith, or whether it's female or male. But I think that's why I find EDI so fascinating, because I think it's a hugely complex space and it's changing all the time. And I find that those some of those kind of differences are the kind of people who are usually excluded but need to be at the highest level of innovation.
Right. Exactly. Because they get it.
Because they will come up with something creative.
Mm.
They're problem solvers, because their brain is going really fast. I want people like that on my team. Whereas, and I think the reason why most people are shy away from that is because it conflicts with their own personality.
Yep.
And I always say, like, you can't lead how you are. You can only lead the individual in the way they want to be led. So
Yep.
that means, like, you do have to be like water. I love Bruce Lee's, some of his sayings. It's only at this age now I'm beginning to understand, especially in the last 3-4 years, what he meant. Like, water can just like adapt, and
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know, and then that means you make space. And everyone talks about safe space. It actually takes bravery. It's more than just safety. It's about bravery. Be bold and brave to do the thing that nobody else will do.
Exactly. That's psychological safety, isn't it? It's not just saying it, it's a safe space. It's that willingness to be honest and transparent. Because if you're saying you want to create a safe space, then you have to be willing to hear some of the things that people will say in those safe spaces and take them on board and not become defensive or and lose your ego, which is difficult if you're a leader. You're in charge, you're the one with the power. You're having to relinquish that temporarily, suspend it, to enable someone else to have that space and time to be vulnerable themselves and tell you some of the things that they're thinking and feeling. But the other thing that you mentioned there in regard to neurodivergence, so yes, people's brains do work differently, vastly differently. Some go faster, some go slower. But that's less of a challenge. More of the challenge is the behaviors that go alongside that. And I talk about it a lot in my posts because it's something that people are very uncomfortable with. And it's one of the reasons why people don't declare their neurodivergence in the workplace. They will say, oh, that person's, oh, well, yeah, well, Steve in accounts, he's a bit quirky. Or, John over there, or, Sally, everyone knows she's a bit strange. And that quirkiness, strangeness, is often neurodivergence, but they are masking quite often to hide those traits and their behavioral traits around stimming. Stimming is a physical activity that enables them to feel more comfortable and at ease and regulated. It could be something as simple as finger waving like this, or finger flapping is very common. And whilst it looks fairly innocuous now, I'm doing it in a controlled way. So, and you know me, and we're comfortable with one another. But if you're in a work setting, it's different. So if you're in a meeting and it's a formal one, you may have guests, and someone starts doing this, it's hard then
Mm.
to be as inclusive as you might be. Yeah, it's not just about the good stuff, the fast brain and the fast processing. It's also about the strange, quirky stuff.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
No, that's really important, I think, to shed light on that because I feel like you're right in catching me out because we tend to focus more on the good stuff and the values, but then you have to understand that to benefit or gain from something, you also have to give up or be compromising. And I think compromising, there's not enough of it within sort of work environments. And I think the bigger the organization, the bigger the challenge. And if you're an organization that's promoting equity, I won't even say diversity inclusion because I think diversity inclusion is not the end result. The end result is equity. I won't even say equality, I would say equity because equity recognizes diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And it's hard because if you don't know what you are, how to promote equity, because you haven't really understood diversity or inclusion, it's hard to then model it. And then everyone's looking towards you to model. I mean, I was on a panel a couple of days ago, inclusive leadership, and we were talking about there were four of us, three other community leaders working in the charity sector, and we were all talking about inclusive leadership and our own experiences. And I felt like saying, "What do you mean by inclusion?" I felt like saying, what is my idea of inclusion is not going to be somebody else's idea. And I think that's the starting point, recognizing if we recognize, again, I'm coming from a spiritual perspective, every one of us is unique, right? If we recognize every one of us is unique, then we have to understand that no two people are going to think the same,
Exactly.
which means we have to be very mindful when we are saying we're inclusive because if somebody feels based on their own thoughts and their own lived experience the way they were treated in the past, their judgment is that you're Muslim and so therefore you can't be inclusive.
Yeah.
I how would I know that? I want that space. I want, as a leader, I want to build that space where somebody who feels that way can actually openly say it without feeling like I'm going to jump down their throat.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. I mean, it's all about, yeah, you've got to let your barriers down. You've got to meet them at where they're at.
Hmm.
Your team members. You can't be up there and they're down. You've got to kind of be like that to have a proper conversation. But leaders always want to be somewhere up there, keeping the other person down there, and it just doesn't work. If you're truly wanting to have that inclusive culture. And it's about, when I think of it in reality, it seems so simple to me, but some people find it very hard to understand. It took me a while. I'm not going to lie and say I got it like that. It took me years to understand what my children need, but now I do. It's a lot easier because you can say to yourself, this person will need time. We
Hmm.
go out to a social function, or even if it's a family gathering where they know each other, they're all very, very comfortable. That kind of interaction, that kind of event is very socially draining, socially, psychologically draining for a neurodivergent person. So, say, for example, you and I maybe have had a meeting like this, we've had, nearly an hour of discussion. I will probably need to go and sit down and reflect quietly in a room on my own. My daughter would probably need to go and lie down, shut the door, and that might take a day for her to recover from. And it took me ages. I used to say, "Oh, why are you so tired? Why, you should be invigorated. You've been out, you've had a good time." But she
Mm.
needs that. She needs that in order to feel like herself again. So it's the way the brain works, but also the way the body reacts to what the brain has had to do. You've had to put your brain through a series of hurdles. Difficult to explain, I know.
No, it's all fascinating. And I think the more you talk, I love what you do on LinkedIn. The more you talk, the more companies, organizations have the benefit to learn. And you must continue talking, Kate, and just ignore the naysayers. I say that's what I do. Because you have to. We're not doing this, which is very uncomfortable. We're
Mm.
not doing this because we need, a platform to show off. We're doing this because we want to spread awareness. I
Yep.
think that was the reason why I started social media, and I can see that you do that. So before we kind of wound up, because there's a lot that we've covered in terms of neurodiversity, I think there's been huge learning, and I'm sure those who watch afterwards will also benefit from some of the stuff you've shared. I just want, to ask you like the last couple of questions, which is what can you do for companies to help raise their awareness? Is my
What
first question.
what can I do? Well, obviously I use social media as a platform to share my knowledge, and my experiences. I think that that's really pivotal. I have a program and a course and a workshop that I run myself personally. I'm now transferring that online to enable people managers in particular to understand neurodivergence, autism, and ADHD and the combined condition, because often they go hand in hand, through the workshop and the program that I run. So very basic, very easy to access, because that's very important for me to have something which is accessible and not too highbrow, not academic, not too intellectual, just very simple, straightforward understanding and experiences around neurodivergence and how that can be transferred to the working environment.
That's brilliant because I think, organizations could really benefit from practical
Exactly. It's all
support.
about practical, it's all about tactical, easy to access tips and tricks, tactical execution. It's not about theory. There's so much theory out there. You can go and get a book from the library if you want and read for the next 10 years, and you still wouldn't have touched the surface. But that's not what I'm about. I'm about practical solutions to the challenges, the everyday challenges posed by neurodivergence.
Brilliant. Thank you. And how can people get in touch with you, access to any of
Yeah, you
your
can find
support?
me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn at Kate Isichei. Just search for the name you see there, or you can find me on my website at wheretolookcoms.co.uk.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kate. It has
Thank
been,
you.
yeah, enlightening. We might have to ask you to come back again
It's
at
an
another
absolute
point.
pleasure, Bonwara. You're a very good friend of mine, so you're always welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you. I hope you've listeners have found it very useful. Do give us feedback. We always love to hear your feedback. It helps to shape what we discuss in future leadership conversations because Kate is absolutely trailblazing in this area. Kate, you want to say something?
No, I
No,
was
okay. I was just trying to read. I was trying to read your face.
no.
So yeah, absolutely trailblazing in helping organizations to understand autism and ADHD. I'm sure many of you are running a company with senior leadership who may not know how to work best with their colleagues, their staff team members who might be autistic and or have ADHD. So do connect with Kate, and hopefully we'll meet you again. Well, myself and Lorlett next Saturday. And meanwhile, have a great weekend. Kate?
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute joy.